On the morning of June 11th, 2012, a silver Audi A4 made its way through the Rostov region of Russia. Inside the car were 5 people. What happened next was so horrifying and unexpected that the dashcam footage has been described as one of the most disturbing videos online. These are some of the most disturbing things on the internet. It happened between the cities of Azov and Starominskaya, on a route lined with trucks, cars, and farmland. In the car was 29-year-old Olga Gaikovich, riding in the passenger seat of a silver Audi A4. She was traveling with her husband Vadim and his brother's family, including a small child in the back seat. The Audi was just driving when it passed a KAMAZ truck, a large, rugged cargo vehicle often used in Russia to haul materials. On that day, it was carrying a load of bricks, stacked high and unsecured. At around 11 a.m., one of those bricks became loose. It slipped off the back of the truck, bounced once on the road, and then launched straight through the windshield of the Audi. It hit Olga in the head. She didn't die immediately, but she was critically wounded. According to medical reports, her skull was split open. She was rushed to a hospital in Azov, where doctors tried to save her for 2 hours. But there was nothing they could do. Olga was pronounced dead. When it happened, the car swerved slightly. Vadim, her husband, begins calling out her name. At first, he sounds confused, after which you hear screaming and complete panic, after he realizes his wife just got hit by the brick. In the back seat, the child starts crying. In the video, you can actually hear Olga's labored breathing. I cannot actually show the impact of the brick or play the audio of the clip because it is too disturbing for YouTube. The truck driver just kept driving, unaware that one of his bricks had just killed someone. He was stopped by police later in Azov. Authorities confirmed he was hauling bricks without proper restraints. People online have commented that it's one of the darkest videos they've ever seen, not because it's graphic, but because of the audio of the people in the car panicking. Just imagine if she took one more sip of coffee, if she stayed longer in the bathroom, or if she didn't find her keys right away. Then she would still be alive. There were early rumors that Olga had died instantly, but witnesses and hospital records confirmed that she survived for nearly 2 hours. The dashcam video, while not overly graphic, quickly spread online. Many people think the truck driver should face serious prison time. In many countries, including Russia, it's illegal to drive with unsecured cargo. Even one loose object can turn deadly at high speeds, and that's exactly what happened here. On January 4th, 2019, 5 teenage girls walked into an escape room in Koszalin, Poland. It was supposed to be a birthday celebration. They were close friends, all of them just 15 years old. The girls had chosen the game Darkness, one of 4 scenarios at the Tonipokoi escape room, a small business that had just opened the previous year. The game Darkness took place in a tiny space, no bigger than a closet, barely 75 square feet, with candles, old armchairs, and makeshift props. The idea was simple. Pretend you're trapped in your strange uncle's house and solve puzzles to escape. The only door to the room had no handle on the inside. Finding the handle was part of the game, and the windows were covered by makeshift walls, completely blocking them off. Around 5:15 p.m., a fire broke out in the waiting room. Investigators later determined it was fueled by leaking gas cylinders connected to a heating stove. Others claimed it may have started from something as small as a candle or even a cigarette left burning on a couch. Whatever the cause was, the fire spread fast. The employee on duty that day, Radosław D., wasn't even in the building when the fire started. He had left to get change for the cash register, leaving 5 minors alone in a locked room with no escape. By the time he returned, the fire had already consumed the front of the building. Flames were blocking every path. According to reports, he didn't use a fire extinguisher. He didn't even try to put it out. And the one hidden exit inside the escape room, a secret passage behind a false fireplace, was never revealed to the girls. Inside the room, they were suffocating. They called emergency services, told the dispatcher they were trapped, that smoke was filling the room, and that they couldn't breathe. One of the girls made a final call to her father. She said just 2 words, "Dad, fire." Those would be the last words he ever heard from her. She died shortly after, along with her 4 friends. All of them died of carbon monoxide poisoning. Not a single one was directly burned by the flames. They suffocated while waiting for help that came too late. When firefighters arrived, they had to use special equipment just to get inside the building. But by then, it was already too late. The girls had celebrated Julia's birthday together. One of the girls, they were all in the same class at junior high school in Koszalin. They'd been looking for a creative way to celebrate, and the escape room had advertised itself exactly that way. A place to spend your birthday creatively. Previous visitors had complained about the escape room, the strong smell of gas, the broken wiring, and the poor condition of the rooms. But no official reports were ever filed. Local authorities never knew. And because Poland didn't require escape rooms to undergo fire safety inspections at the time, nothing was done. The Prime Minister, Mateusz Morawiecki, demanded immediate safety reforms. Koszalin declared January 6th a day of mourning. Every local performance, parade, or party was cancelled and the city went quiet. The Tony Pokój escape room was run by Miłosz S., a young man who had registered the business in his grandmother's name, Małgorzata W. She, along with Miłosz's mother, Beata W., was involved in managing the venue. All 3, along with Radosław D., the employee who left the girls alone, were arrested and put on trial. Each of them tried to shift the blame. Miłosz accused Radosław of using the gas heater when he wasn't supposed to. Radosław claimed that Miłosz never gave proper safety training. Nobody accepted responsibility and none of them pleaded guilty. In the end, the court sentenced Miłosz and Radosław to 2 years in prison. They were also banned for 10 years from running any sports, recreation, or cultural businesses. Małgorzata and Beata received 1 year in prison. Each of the victims' families received 200,000 zloty, about 47,000 in US dollars in compensation. Emergency services came under scrutiny too. Witnesses at the trial said the paramedics never even tried to resuscitate the girls, that they assumed the victims were dead too quickly, that an unauthorized person was in the dispatch room when the girls called for help, that maybe, just maybe, someone could have done more. The girls were buried together, side by side, on January 10th. Thousands came to the funeral. The ceremony ended with a recording, a song written and performed by one of the victims, Victoria. Over 500 escape rooms were inspected across the country. Over 100 locations were shut down. New laws were passed that made fire inspections mandatory for entertainment venues. Every escape room in Poland would now be evaluated at least once every 2 years. They would need emergency exits, clear evacuation routes, and strict adherence to fire safety codes. Today, the building at 88 Piłsudski Street is empty, and the escape room no longer exists.
They done moved from here. Go to Atlanta. Charlotte ain't far enough. Try to get your damn ass kicked. You don't lie. You don't lie. You don't lie. You don't lie.
On the morning of February 26, 2018, a man named Prentis Robinson walked out of the Wingate Police Department in North Carolina, holding his phone on a selfie stick. He had just reported one of his phones stolen. He was live streaming on Facebook. It was something he did regularly. Prentis was a 55-year-old man who had made a name for himself in his neighborhood, calling out the problems he saw on his street. He filmed regularly, sometimes exposing drug dealers, sometimes calling out family members. He didn't hold back. If someone was doing wrong, Prentis Robinson had no problem saying it to anyone who would watch. On this particular morning, Prentis was upset. He said that a family member had stolen one of his cell phones and he had just walked into the Wingate Police Department to report it. The conversation with police was normal. He walked out smiling, still streaming. At around 10 a.m., about a block away from the station, the stream kept rolling. You can hear him say, "You on live." He's speaking to someone off camera. And then, we hear 4 loud gunshots. Prentis Robinson had just been murdered. His killer was later identified as Douglas Colson, a man who was reportedly armed with a long-barreled gun. He was seen walking past the fallen camera as he fled the scene. His face wasn't fully visible, but he didn't care. He didn't try to hide. He had just murdered a man a block from a police station and didn't even run immediately. Wingate University, located just minutes from the scene, was put on lockdown. Students were told to shelter in place and classes were cancelled. Millions saw the moment on the social media. Facebook eventually took the video down, saying they weren't sure whether Prentis had wanted that moment broadcast live. Police Chief Donnie Gay was one of the last people to ever speak to Prentis. Gay looked stunned. The crime happened right outside his department. Prentis had spent most of his life in Wingate. He'd graduated from the local high school. Aside from a brief move to Atlanta, he'd lived in North Carolina his entire life. On his Facebook page, he listed himself as a musician, a man of faith, a man who wanted better for his community. Every time he went live, his goal was to clean up this area, as Chief Gay later put it. It's still unclear why Douglas Colson shot him. Police never gave a full motive. The suspect, Colson, was questioned that same day, but initially released. It wasn't until the next morning that police issued a warrant for his arrest. After seeing the heat around the case grow, he turned himself in. On the evening of June 18, 2016, actor Anton Yelchin was expected to arrive at a rehearsal in Los Angeles. But when he didn't show up, his friends started worrying. They repeatedly called and texted, but each attempt went unanswered, deepening their concern. Deciding they could no longer wait, his friends drove to his home in Studio City, Los Angeles, arriving just after 1 a.m. What they found would haunt them forever. As they approached Anton's driveway, they discovered him pinned against a brick pillar and a security fence, trapped by his own vehicle, a Jeep Grand Cherokee. By the time emergency services arrived, Anton was pronounced dead at the scene, a victim what authorities would later describe as blunt traumatic asphyxia. Investigators quickly pieced together a chilling timeline of events. Apparently, Anton had just stepped out of his car to check the locked gate for mail when his Jeep, parked on a steep incline, unexpectedly rolled backward, crushing him against the gatepost. The thought of those final moments is deeply disturbing. Being trapped, fully conscious, pressed against the immovable brick pillar with absolutely no escape, knowing there was nothing he could do to save himself. It was a tragic end. The very model of Jeep that Anton owned had already been involved in numerous similar accidents. Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, the manufacturer, was aware of the danger. The gearshift design was confusing. It made it difficult for drivers to tell if their vehicle was truly in park. Due to this issue, Fiat Chrysler had recalled all 2014 and 2015 Grand Cherokees months before Anton's death. But, crucially, the software update needed to fix the problem wasn't yet widely available at dealerships. It became tragically clear that Anton's death might have been entirely preventable. The talented 27-year-old actor, beloved for his role as Pavel Chekhov in the rebooted Star Trek films, had only begun to make his mark. Directors, actors, and fans flooded social media, expressing heartbreak over losing someone so young and promising. In the months and years following his death, Anton was honored repeatedly in films and series that he had been involved in. Anton's family, grappling with their unimaginable loss, decided to seek justice. In August 2016, his parents filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Fiat Chrysler, the company responsible for the defective Jeep. Although the dealership attempted to shift blame onto Anton himself, claiming he had misused or modified the car, Fiat Chrysler ultimately reached a confidential settlement with the family in 2018. His parents memorialized his life and career through a deeply personal documentary, Love, Antosha, which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2019, sharing their son's story with the world. On the night of October 29th, 2022, the streets of Itaewon, a popular nightlife district in Seoul, South Korea, were filled with people, tens of thousands of them. It was the first major Halloween celebration since the pandemic restrictions had lifted. At around 10:20 p.m., in a narrow alley just beside the Hamilton Hotel, the crowd surged and people started falling. Soon, hundreds of people were trapped in a pile of bodies, stacked on top of each other, crushed, unable to move and breathe. When it was over, 159 people were dead. Another 196 were injured and dozens were in critical condition. Some would never recover. And all of it happened in the middle of Seoul's busiest party district. In South Korea, Itaewon became a place where people could escape, where Koreans, foreigners, and younger generations could express themselves more freely. And on Halloween, that freedom drew in massive crowds. It had been building for years, since at least 2010. Halloween had become a kind of unofficial street festival, but 2022 was different. Over 100,000 people showed up. There was no event organizer and no crowd control planned. Even though Seoul had a real-time crowd prediction system using mobile data, it wasn't activated that night. And even though the Itaewon police had asked for extra support days earlier, the request was ignored. In total, just 137 officers were assigned to the area. To put that in perspective, 1,300 officers had been assigned to a BTS concert earlier that month, and 6,500 officers were deployed to another protest happening elsewhere in Seoul, on the same night as the Halloween celebration. In Itaewon, there were barely enough officers to patrol the streets, let alone manage a dangerous crowd. And the alley where the crush happened was a death trap. Just 3.2 meters wide, about 10 feet, rough pavement, steep incline, and one side was partially blocked by an iron wall, making the space even narrower. That incline would later cause people at the top of the alley to fall forward, right onto the people below them. By 7 p.m., people were already saying the area felt dangerous. It took 10 minutes just to walk a few meters, but no action was taken. Between 6:34 and 10 p.m., 79 emergency calls were made, many warning that people might fall or get crushed. 11 of those calls came from people already experiencing compressive suffocation. And still, nothing was done. Many nearby buildings and businesses had already closed their doors, meaning people in the alley had nowhere to escape. At 10:08 p.m., the crush began. According to survivors, it started when a group of young men began pushing from the top of the alley. Once a few people lost their balance, it turned into a chain reaction. People fell on top of each other. Bodies stacked up in layers, 5 or 6 deep. No one could move. Some people tried to climb nearby ledges to escape. A few did. 3 off-duty US soldiers happened to be nearby. They jumped onto a ledge and began pulling people out. One said the crowd was so thick, felt like 15 feet of bodies compressed together. It was a long time, he said, for people stuck in there not to breathe. At 10:15 p.m., the fire department was called. 4 ambulances were dispatched, but they couldn't reach the scene. There were too many people. The alleys were blocked, and, incredibly, in some areas, bars kept playing music, and people kept dancing, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge what was happening just steps away. One video showed people posing for selfies and blocking ambulances trying to enter the area. It went viral, and it sparked outrage. Emergency workers didn't finish removing victims until after midnight. For many, it was too late. There were so many unconscious victims that bystanders had to perform CPR right there in the street. People in costumes, covered in sweat, trying to bring others back to life. By the end of the night, dozens of bodies lay on the street, covered in blankets, lined up on sidewalks. Many had died from asphyxiation. They had simply been squeezed to death. By the end of 2022, more than 1,300 survivors and family members were receiving mental health treatment. And in October 2023, the National Fire Agency reported that over 1,300 firefighters who had responded to the disaster were still dealing with psychological trauma. Hundreds of videos of the crush and its aftermath were uploaded to TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. South Korean social media platforms began issuing warnings, asking users to stop spreading the footage. Some survivors even said they were being harassed online, accused of faking injuries, or told they had no right to grieve. There has still been no official list of the dead released to the public. The Ministry of Public Administration claimed they didn't even have one. The Catacombs of Paris are a place most people will never truly understand. Beneath one of the most famous cities in the world lies a network of underground tunnels packed wall to wall with the skeletal remains of over 6 million people. Originally, they were just old stone quarries, but by the late 1700s, Paris had a serious problem. Its cemeteries were overflowing. Bodies were buried on top of bodies, and sometimes the weight of it all caused the very ground to collapse, especially when mixed with rain. In 1774, part of the Holy Innocents Cemetery literally caved in, dragging basements and streets down with it. That collapse forced the city to act. Starting in 1788, every single night, horse-drawn wagons made trips across Paris, loaded with human remains. They dumped the bones into an open mine shaft. What began as a desperate solution became a permanent fixture under the city. A hidden ossuary carved out of limestone stretching for over 150 miles beneath the capital. The deeper parts of the catacombs are strictly off-limits to the public. They're illegal to enter, but that hasn't stopped people. A whole underground culture of explorers exists, cataphiles, as they're known in France. These are urban adventurers who enter through secret doors, sewer systems, or forgotten subway access points. But sometimes, people get lost. The first and only officially confirmed death in the catacombs happened in 1793. A man named Philibert Aspire, who worked as a doorkeeper at a hospital, decided to explore the tunnels alone. It's believed he lost his light source somewhere deep inside and couldn't find his way back. He wandered in pitch-black darkness until he died. His body was found 11 years later, just a few feet from a staircase that could have led him out. The only reason they could identify him was by the keyring from his job, still attached to his jacket. But that's not the story that creeped out the internet. That came 2 centuries later. In the early 1990s, a man exploring the forbidden sections of the catacombs brought a handheld camcorder with him. The tape was discovered by Francis Friedland, an explorer who regularly investigated the catacombs. He found the camera discarded in a shallow puddle, and when he watched the tape, he saw what felt like something from a horror movie. Friedland claims that the footage is over 40 minutes long.
After about 40 minutes of these point-of-view shots and these pictures of bones, the person begins to walk faster and faster. Then he begins to run. We hear his breathing get louder and louder, as though something was scaring him. He's frightened. Occasionally he stops, perhaps to try to decide which way to run among all the many different corridors. He's running faster and faster and faster, deeper and deeper into the catacombs. And all of a sudden, he drops the camera. The camera just drops on the ground and keeps rolling. And you see his feet just run away. And it keeps rolling until it runs out of tape.
No one knows who he was. No one ever came to claim the camera, and no body was ever found. Some people think it's real. A man who panicked, lost his sense of direction, dropped the camera, and maybe managed to find a way out. Others think it's a hoax. However, Friedland, who keeps a low profile, claims that the video is real to this very day. There's no clear answer, but the idea is terrifying. Being lost in a silent, pitch-black labyrinth filled with human bones, alone and disoriented.
Anybody can get lost in here. Anyone can get lost in here. I mean, imagine just running out of batteries on your flashlight. You're dead. You're dead. It's true. I mean, just look at this. You lose your flashlight. What happens? We're finished. We're dead.
Another incident happened in 2020, where 2 teenage boys, just 16 and 17 years old, snuck into the restricted part of the catacombs one night. They vanished for 3 days, and no one knew where they were. Finally, the Paris Fire Department was called in. Using tracker dogs, it took 4 hours just to find them. When they were pulled out, they were cold, dehydrated, and terrified, but somehow still alive. That's why most of the underground network is completely off-limits. The publicly accessible section is tiny, about 1 mile of walkable space. But the true catacombs, the forbidden ones, stretch out for nearly 150 miles. That's longer than the entire city itself. There have also been reports of full-scale movie theaters set up deep underground, complete with projectors, power sources, and seating. In one case, police discovered an entire restaurant and bar, built illegally inside a hidden chamber, complete with menus and ambient music, but no one knew who ran it. Since the creation of Lake Lanier in Georgia in 1956, over 700 people have died. More than 200 of those deaths have happened since 1994, and the number only keeps growing. Lake Lanier is a man-made reservoir located in northern Georgia. In the 1950s, the US Army built Beaufort Dam to help control flooding and supply water to Atlanta. To build the lake, the government chose to flood an area that was very much alive. Entire communities were displaced, especially the town of Oscarville, a historically black community. In 1912, decades before the lake was even built, a young white woman named May Crow was assaulted and murdered. 3 young black men were accused. One, Rob Edwards, was lynched by a mob. The other 2 were tried by an all-white jury and hanged in front of a crowd of thousands. Afterward, white mobs calling themselves Night Riders forced nearly all black families out of Forsyth County. They burned churches, destroyed homes, and took land. By 1920, a community of over 1,000 black residents had been reduced to just 30. Years later, when the lake was planned, the US government didn't demolish what was left of the town. They simply flooded it. Homes, churches, businesses, even the cemetery, everything was left behind, buried underwater. Entire buildings remain preserved beneath Lake Lanier. That's why so many believe the lake is cursed. The very first tragedy tied to Lake Lanier occurred in 1958. 2 women, Susie Roberts and Delia May, were driving home from a dance when their car vanished near the bridge over the lake. A year later, a body without hands and in a blue dress was found floating in the water, too decomposed to identify. It wasn't until 1990, more than 30 years later, the divers finally discovered a Ford sedan deep beneath the surface. Inside were the bones of Susie Roberts. The earlier body must have been Delia May. One of the deadliest days in Lake Lanier's history came on Christmas Day, 1964. A car carrying 11 people went off the bridge. 7 died, including 5 children. Lake Lanier continues to claim lives every single year. In July 2023, 3 men died in separate incidents over a single weekend. One was Thomas Milner, just 24 years old. He jumped into the water from a dock and was electrocuted. Electrical current had somehow entered the water and he didn't stand a chance. That same weekend, a 61-year-old man dove off the side of his boat. Minutes later, he was found dead, floating. The very same day, a 27-year-old named Ramon Diaz Soria was out celebrating a friend's birthday. He jumped from a boat, wearing a life jacket, but it wasn't secured properly. The jacket floated to the surface, but he never did. His family said he couldn't swim. Witnesses jumped in after him, but it was too late. His body was found the next day, in 60 feet of water. The water at Lake Lanier is known for being dark and murky, making rescue efforts incredibly difficult. Searchers use sonar to find bodies, and divers report feeling arms and legs in the water. One diver told CNN, "You reach out into the dark and you feel an arm or a leg, and it doesn't move." Even celebrities haven't been spared. In 2012, Usher's 11-year-old stepson, Kyle Glover, was struck by a jet ski while floating in the lake. He was left brain dead. Days later, he died in the hospital. His mother, Tamika Foster, has called for Lake Lanier to be drained, and she's not alone. Many Georgians believe the lake should be shut down, not just because of the deaths, but because of what lies beneath it. The unfinished business and buried history. And then there's the numbers. 11 million people visit Lake Lanier every year. Some say the deaths are just math, that with that many people, accidents are inevitable. But the patterns, the frequency, and the similarities make that explanation harder to accept. That was the end of this video. If you enjoy this content, you can watch this video that YouTube thinks you will enjoy, or subscribe for more similar content. Thank you for watching, stay safe, and until next time.